Really interesting idea, but maybe those are a little too big. The other things that you find is you also find strong emotional types that aren't necessarily feel-good types that we also have. The sacrificial hero, which only shows up in a few games, and when it does, if it works, it can be really powerful. And then I think this is a really fascinating thing is, the scariest stuff is the stuff that's most, sorry, when we're dealing with fear-type games, scary games, not just the fear name, but fear, anyway, yeah. You guys will know there's a game called Fear, right?
Yes.
Rambling up here. All right. That when you're dealing with things that are scary, the more realistic they are, the more they actually fit the real, what we understand about the spiritual realm, the scary they are to the world. I mean, it actually works that way. The more realistic things get, the scarier they get. And when you start getting really bizarre and things are way over the top in terms of things, they stop being scary. Well, why did they stop being scary? Is it because they were, you just kind of went, well, the reason is because you've stepped out of the line of what real reality is. And that's scary to the world when you start talking about those spiritual things. Hey, again, we have an upper hand. We understand what it is. We can put stuff in there that not only is really, really scary, but is also correct within its spiritual context. That's an amazing, amazing area to be in. It's also a little scary. Right. Okay. So I'd like to move on from there to talk about kind of a list of bullet points. We've talked about a whole bunch of ideas for game design, and we could talk ad infinitum about those. What I want to talk about is some high-level bullet points that are not talking so much about the individual elements of fun, but are more talking about the some other ideas that kind of deal with the general principles of game design that I've come away with to realize are really kind of cool things that we should be using and trying to leverage, because I've seen them a couple of places. People seem to have not quite caught on to why they work, and I think we ought to leverage this and start taking them. And then at the same time, I'm going to try and talk about that original idea of fun and use some good and bad examples of people who use these ones. All right. So, and I'm going to be using Spore extensively. How many people here have played Spore? All right. So for those of you who haven't, or I guess for those of you who have, Spore is a great example of game design gone wrong. I don't know what happened to Will Wright, but every single stage in Spore is a great case study on an example of some idea that was a good game design that failed in execution. So we're going to just kind of go through and just chop that one up so I don't have to pick a Christian game. Right. All right. So one thing that's worked in a few games and hasn't necessarily caught on is the idea of utilizing gameplay rewards. So the classic game model is you play through, you take any given FPS that's out there from the early days, and you play through and you get to the big boss creature and it's a really hard fight and you beat the boss creature and you get a cutscene. And then you go to the next level and you fight all the way up to the top and you win and you get a cutscene. And then, so rewards in those kind of games always used to be, oh wow, I went to full motion video. And then it switched to, oh, I went to in-game video. And now it's just like, it's cutscenes is all you get. And that's kind of this sense that somehow I get a reward because I can relax, which works. There's a certain sense of satisfaction. Okay, I finished it. I can just bask in that for a moment. But the games, a couple of games that have been really successful, and one of them that people just rave about, except very few people seem to get. How many people have played Half-Life 2? Probably stretch my categorization. Half-Life 2, if you read any of the reviews on it, everybody saying it's a really good game, it's a really good game. And then there's the 6th level, and it's just amazing. It is so much fun. Why? Well, what happens is you play the entire game, moving through this kind of experience with all these bad guys coming at you, and you get in and you fight these big guys. At the end of the 5th level, there's this giant scene where you're fighting all this stuff. And then the 6th level starts, and you drop back off at the big base, and you go into the big base, and something goes horribly wrong, and your little tiny gravity gun that you had turns into a super gravity gun. And now you wander through the 6th level, and the 6th level is, at least for my gameplay experience, was ridiculously easy. The game wasn't about, oh, this is the last level is the really challenging one. There was lots of story elements happening in the 6th level, which kind of gave the cutscene feeling. But the cool thing is, you could use your gravity gun. Those guys who were annoying you before, you could just grab them with your gun and go, whoop, whoop, and you're tossing them around, and all these guys are just a real pain at the beginning. You can just grab them and throw them, and you pull them through. You got these energy fields, and you're grabbing them on the other side of the energy field and sucking them through them, and they go flying. And the thing was just a blast to play. And the reason it was a blast to play. Jedi, can you run a grab?
So the reason it was Blast to Play is it was that role reversal. Was you started with the fun stuff of fighting all these guys, and once you got past that point of being annoyed with them, you suddenly got to take advantage of them. You suddenly got to, haha, the little guy, remember that archetype we talked about, the little guy who was being chased at the beginning, getting bullied around, has now become the hero. And it really, really worked. And then some other games have done that. So Katamari has Tasty Planet. Has anybody here played Tasty Planet? Casual gamers? You played Tasty Planet. You haven't played it?
I haven't heard of it.
Okay. So it's on, it's the Big Fish has it, but it's a...
I'm on Big Fish. What type of game is it? What genre?
It's hard to describe. It's like Katamari Damacy. You're basically this little gray blob, and you go around and you suck up other creatures. And every level, so it's kind of like, this takes this idea to every level. So every level you start as your blob is about that big, and all of these things come and eat you if you hit them. And there's lots of little things that are running around too. And as you play through the level, you accumulate more and more of the little things, and you get bigger and bigger. And by the end of the level, you're eating everything. So all those guys that were really annoying to you at the beginning and you were dodging, at the end of the level, you're just sweeping around, just cleaning up everything. So it has kind of that cleaning archetype where I'm getting the whole screen clean, and it also has that role reversal of I started off being chased by these guys, and now I'm eating these guys. And it's really a satisfying game. It's not necessarily very good in context, because you grow bigger and you start eating people and everything. But alright, so anyway, role reversals is a really good feeling, and in a sense of an in-game reward. So in each of these levels, at the beginning of the level, it's really tough. As the level goes on, at some point you get big enough where you can eat anything, and suddenly the level switches to being fun. And it's just a sense of the game itself is rewarding me for having reached this level. It's not like I got to a level where I'm big enough and then I switched to a cutscene and said, ha, and now we start you back at the beginning again. Instead, you get to a certain level and then you're like, aha, I get to eat everything and this is really fun. So it found an element, so another time at the role reversal, but so much the idea that when you get to a certain point in the game, rather than switching to a cutscene, you just stay in game and you give the player something really fun to do. That's kind of the reward is within the context of the game. Bad example? Spore. You can kind of see Spore kind of took, I'm guessing they must have played Tasty Planet at some point, or at least Katamari, and said, hey, we like that idea, we're going to copy that. So they took the same idea, gave it absolutely beautiful visuals. I don't know if you played through this, but there's like this level, you can see things moving underneath you, and it's just a beautiful game. But what happens is, in the process of doing that transition, they lost two things. One happens, when you get to a certain size, you get big enough to that point where you're just about to be able to start eating everything, and everything around you shrinks. And suddenly you're the little guy with the totem pole again. And then you keep playing through, and boom, everything shrinks. So you never get to that point where you feel like the role reversal happened. They take that out of the game. Two, you never actually get to clear the whole screen because stuff just keeps coming in and coming in. So you keep doing that all the way up to the top of the game. So it's like Tasty Planet with beautiful visuals, and then they nerfed all the fun stuff out of it. And so what you're left with is, I can see what they were trying to do, but they didn't keep track of what was fun and make sure that stayed in the game. It would have been incredibly easy to do, but they just, I don't think, kept track of what was fun. Okay, give players' actions meaning. So, this is where we talk about being able to care about what the player cares about. I think is a really big area for us to get involved in. Being able to track what's going on in the environment, see what people are enjoying, and then try to make sure that we're catering to that within the course of the game. Yeah. This is important during design, like we talked about. If you're doing feedback with people, listen and look at what people are liking about your game. You may be surprised. You may think this is the fun part of the game, and everybody else is going off and doing something else. They're having fun trying to figure something out. If people are having fun doing something other than what you planned, that's not a bad thing, that's a good thing. What that means is maybe you need to look at that other thing and figure out how to make that a core piece of the game.